Okay, at 6:01, we'll call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Hillsborough City Council to order. First item on the agenda is the invocation given by David Hurt of the First Baptist Church. Please stand.
Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today. We give you thanks. We give you honor. We give you praise for every blessing, seen and unseen. Heavenly Father, we ask that you would be with every city councilman. We would pray that you would be with every first responder, fire, police, EMS, and every resident of Hillsborough, that you would show them the light, that you would be with every decision that is made, whether it's in this hall or not, that you would give us wisdom on what to say and not to say. Dear Heavenly Father, we praise you for being God even when we don't realize it. We ask all this in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda, here statements from persons wishing to address the council. We have two. First individual, Miss Susie Hafer. If you don't mind, Miss Hafer, if you'll state your name and your address. Remember, please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. My name is Susan Hafer. I live at 218 Corsicana Street in Hillsborough, Texas. I am here today regarding our Mayor Pro Tem, Leanne Richmond. The Richmonds became my neighbors over 30 years ago. We are not only neighbors, but Leanne and Andy have become my family over the many years we've spent together. Many hours we have spent throughout the years. Cookouts, lake days, binging our favorite TV shows, and countless vacations, and looking forward to our next in October. These are two of the finest people Hillsborough has to offer and given of themselves tirelessly over the years. They have not only given to me and my children, but to our wonderful community. I wanted to state that I know Leanne spent her birthday weekend at her new home on Highway 22 as her whole family was present, and they were adjusting to getting moving in things, and Andy does live there on the weekends when he's home. If you know Andy, he is a go-getter, and he is getting everything ready for them to move in. I know that last week, she had not only spent Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but last night, as she lives right next door to me. She still has her home office at 212 Corsicana Street, and she divides her hours between early mornings and late evenings. I can promise you, she's going to miss her nosy neighbor when she sells her home on Corsicana Street and moves to her wonderful new place on Highway 22. And by the way, welcome to Medicare. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hafer. Next individual is Basil Zangari. Basil, same rules apply. Please state your name and your address and keep your comments to 3 minutes, okay?
All right, good evening. I was actually going to keep this short to regards to Leanne, but the fact that she has her whole cheerleading squad here tonight, I think I might take the whole 3 minutes to talk about this. Staying there one night doesn't mean that you live there. The charter is clear about a bona fide resident. Nobody can argue that she lives at or works at 212 Corsicana Street, since we're putting addresses out there. However, since the last council meeting, you admitted right here next to me in front of Edgar and Clay Sparks, who's not here tonight, that you were waiting on some sort of tax exemption before you fully moved in. Now, you have notified the city. I applaud you for that. At least you notified them that you were planning on moving. But it doesn't take 60 days to move. It almost looks like what you're doing, from all the evidence of all the people that have sent me videos, sent me photos, that you're trying to appear to look like you live there so you can remain on the council for whatever your reason is. You took an oath. You're a public official. You have two former current law enforcement officers sitting on this panel. You're breaking the law. You got one right here. If you continue to do so, I will file a criminal complaint. I will give you till the next council to resign, because I got video where your husband came out and encountered me. I literally had pulled up in front of him, and I'm sure you saw it online. That's why your expression the way it is. You're a bad poker player. Bottom line is just do the right thing. Step down. I don't want to file charges on you. I don't hate you. I don't dislike you. But you know what? You run with the elitist in this town. You brought Natasha with you today, a little cheerleading support. Leanne. Oh, by the way, the other law that you break every weekend on Saturday night at the yard is sitting on the sidewalk. That's a state law and a city ordinance that you violate. But that's right. I forgot you're a city council member. You're above the law. That's why you sit up there and the peasants sit down here. It's time for you to go. Just do the honorable thing. Just resign. Don't make this about having to file litigation and criminal charges. I mean, look how nervous you're getting. You're a bad poker player. You are a bad poker player. Just step down already. For the rest of you, I commend you. You know, most of you are doing the right thing. I really haven't had a whole lot on you. I mean, I did miss you the last time, Councilman Fleming. I know you don't like the cameras, but fortunately, they're everywhere. Flock cameras, and that's what those data centers are going to be, is a complete police state tracking you everywhere you go. That's why I'm trying to keep the data centers out of here. How much time we got left? Okay. Your husband admitted on camera that you live there. Your car's been there. The flags have been moved from your house, which is a symbol of occupying a residence. So you can sit there and laugh all you want. Bottom line is, people keep sending me stuff, and they will continue to send me stuff for the next 2 weeks. I would love for you to be at the 212 address and have people send me stuff at night, not during the daytime when you're working. Done? Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving along to the consent agenda. Deliberate and act on the approval of minutes for the regular meeting on June 2nd, 2026. Act on the approval of bills. Deliberate and act on a resolution approving the Department of Public Safety to submit a grant application through the Office of the Governor for rifle-resistant body armor. Council, does anyone have any questions about any of those individual agenda items, or we don't want to separate any of those out? Discuss further. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move it. I'll move it. Second.
Any further discussion on the agenda item? Hearing none, I'll take a vote.
Councilmember Singh.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyd.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers. Aye. Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Richmond. Aye. Councilmember Garner. Aye.
Moving along to the regular agenda, hold a public hearing, second reading, and deliberate and act on an ordinance to increase water service rates.
Mayor and council, I'll try to not belabor all these slides. We went through it in considerable detail last time, but for the benefit of anyone here who may not have heard that presentation, I do want to try to give it its due. We had anticipated a 15% water rate increase. We've been sort of telegraphing that for about the past year because we anticipated receiving the third of 3 significant rate increases from Aquila. What is different is that we are proposing this rate increase to happen a couple of months earlier than we ordinarily would because of some major projects that are happening this summer. So let's talk about the previous water rates and how we got here and why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in. Because I think one of the questions that we hear from citizens is, well, you just raised our water rates last year. There was a significant one the year before. You know, why are we coming back? So let's look at that. In the original kind of big picture rate increase in June of 2024, the goal was to increase revenue by over $2 million because we were losing money in our system. So year over year, the revenues were not keeping up with expenses. We were cutting away from our fund balance and operating on a deficit. And so sooner or later, you physically run out of money in the account. So the first thing we needed to do was cover our existing costs. We also needed to pay for a crew to do some improvements, because the problem with the existing costs is that the existing workload was not keeping up with the system issues. So the system was getting worse and worse. We were not replacing pipe. We were barely keeping up with the leaks. It was less reliable year over year. And so funding adequately what we were already doing was necessary, but we also needed to be able to do more than we were doing because things were getting worse and we needed them to get better. The other thing that we did when we did that rate increase, so that's why we need the $2 million. It's called a revenue requirement. So the other thing that we did during that rate increase is we shifted the cost burden, because when we did the analysis, we found that residents were using about 40% of the water, but they were paying about 60% of the costs. And so when we flipped things around, we reshifted the burden and lowered residents' costs, and particularly we held the lowest water users to the lowest possible increase, so that people who are, potentially on a fixed income, or, thinking about our older folks, would not be unduly burdened by the rate increases. And I went back and looked. The rate increase that was approved was a roughly 18% increase. So it was 70% across the board, but it was a roughly 18% increase for a low-use residential water user. It was a 186% increase for a high-use industrial water user. So we say 70% across the board, but that's not what people experienced. It was either much lower or much higher than that, depending on what type of water user. So we did that, and then shortly after we did that rate increase, we got an unexpected $1.1 million cost increase handed to us from our supplier, Aquila Water Supply. So that went into effect as of October, whether we did anything or not. So we were trying to raise $2 million. That $1.1 million rate increase from Aquila, we weren't going to be able to do any of the things that we needed to do. So for that reason, we did a second increase that we did in November, but it did not cover the full cost of Aquila's increase. We just didn't feel like people had it to give. We had just done this massive increase in restructuring, so we said, okay, we're going to have to just find something else to cut. Maybe we'll push back on the additional work that we were going to try to do, put that off a little bit, and make less of an increase. So increase number one, $2 million. Increase number two, we lost money on. So these were the intentions. We were going to go from 3.9 million to 7.1 million in water revenues. Unfortunately, what happened was we did not, in fact, net that increase. So we put the increase into effect, but the money that we received was not nearly what it was projected to be. Partly because of a couple of wet years, partly because if stuff's more expensive, people buy less of it. But it was a dramatically lower revenue increase in terms of actual money received than projected. So our goals, right? We were gonna increase revenue. We were gonna cover our existing costs. We were gonna pay for these improvements, and we were gonna pay for as much as possible of Aquila's increase. What we got, instead of about $3 million across those two increases, we got $1.5 million in increased revenue, and we had to give most of that, 1.1, 1.2, to Aquila. So in effect, instead of raising by $2 million, we raised by $400,000, which was not enough to meet any of the additional goals. Certainly not enough to stop losing money, not enough to add anything. We were not able to do those improvements. So then, here comes the following year. And the other part about that is we don't know that, because it's not clear until your summer months that are the highest water use months. you don't know what your full revenue picture is going to be until you get to sort of June, July, August, and by that point, the year is already gone. So here we come next summer, October 2025. We went back to Aquila and we said, look, I know you guys are considering raising this by another $1 million. It's going to kill us. We need a smaller increase so that we can raise a little bit more than your increase. We've got to be bringing in a little bit more money than we're paying you so that we can address these long-standing problems and do something about this water system. So we increased revenues by about $1 million. It was a 20% even across the board. Aquila went up on us about $500,000. And this was to try to get closer to what we were trying to do in the first place. That went, oh no, I turned it off. How did I do that? Okay, whew, scared me. That one, that one actually did what it was supposed to do. So, but we were still behind by $1.6 million from where we needed to be in 2025. So the thing that we did do, gaining a clearer picture and realistically saying, well, we can't go back and ask for another 30, 40, 50% rate increase to try to make this dollar amount up. We did a shift in our tactics. Instead of purchasing equipment and running a separate crew to do water line replacements, we decided to contract that work out and to, I don't want to say do it on the cheap, but to do it differently and focus on particular components that are running through fields instead of through streets, that have fewer service connections, fewer street to tear up. You're not going to have to put that curb and gutter and driveway and things like that. So it would be a less expensive and also require less engineering. That was the reason that we selected the projects that we did. And fortunately, it's working. So if you look, this is the last 5 years and a half or so of Aquila water purchases. So this is the water that's coming into our system. That sort of Texas giant roller coaster dip is in the fall of 2025 when we began implementing these line replacements. There was a noticeable, obvious, and I'm not going to say that's the whole thing. You can see use drops every year in that same time of year. So it's not like that's the whole thing, but you can see that is the most dramatic moment in 5.5 years of water use. Obviously something changed. And then that dark blue line, you can see that's the first few months of 2026. So we dropped our water use, our water buying from Aquila, and we kept that number low. So that is consistent with, we did something different, we're continuing to reap the benefits of those decisions. So that brings us to today. So we're confident that what we're doing is going to get us there eventually in terms of lowering the water use from Aquila, lowering our water loss. That will reduce our operating costs and the burden on our residents long term. But what we're able to do with our own funds, and, from water bill payments, et cetera, is something like 3% a year of what needs to be done. And so we're not going to make, this is going to help us in the long term, but it's not going to help us fast enough that we're not going to have to raise rates in the short term, especially because we expect another rate increase from Aquila come in this fall. The good news is that is the third of the 3 big increases that we expect. We do not anticipate a big increase from Aquila in coming years. They've sort of said we've split it into 3, we've got 2 down, we've got 1 to go, that's great. But staff is requesting that we look at this a couple of months early. Ordinarily, we would be doing this in the fall to go into effect October 1 when our new payments to Aquila go into effect. But we have a couple of big projects happening this summer that between the 2 of them are going to involve $700,000 to $900,000 worth of engineering. Those are not projects that we selected. TxDOT is replacing all of the streets around the courthouse. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we've got to move our facilities before they bury them under 10 inches of fresh concrete, or we'll have a really difficult time trying to get to them after that. And the water and sewer lines underneath that TxDOT project are lines that we have a ton of trouble with. They're ancient, they're problematic. The sewer line is way down deep underneath Waco Street. I mean, it's all a mess. And so we know if we don't handle it now, it's going to be a horrible, horrible mess to try to deal with it in the future. So We're expecting an increase of around $700,000 from Aquila. If council approves an increase in revenue of $700,000 to $900,000, that would give us a couple $100,000 this summer to go towards that engineering. It still doesn't resolve our prior issues. And I want to say, I did everybody a disservice in the last meeting by not talking about a 50% increase. And the reason I did that is because I don't think that's what your council wants. And I don't want to be seen as arguing for a 50% water rate increase. I think if I'm being just totally honest. But it's not fair to anybody here to not be clear that that's what it would take to solve the real problem. We've been downgraded on our bond rating. That means that when we go out to borrow money in the future, it's going to be more expensive. We've been downgraded on the basis of weak cash reserves. We've been spending more than we've been making. We've spent through our reserves. In fiscal 2025, Water and Sewer Fund was basically out of money. A 15% or 12% increase right now doesn't solve that problem. I mean, to get to where we're really solving the problems, we would have to be looking at something like a 50% increase in water rates. And frankly, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But if we don't explain that that's the real situation, then people aren't going to understand the basis of the council's decisions. So what we're looking at is we've got a water rate increase, a sewer rate increase, and a trash rate increase on the agenda tonight. The trash increase has already essentially been approved. Our cost to the trash provider has already been approved. The trash rate increase would just pass along to the customer the city's cost increase that's already happening. The sewer increase is a minor increase that we'll talk about in a second. But this slide shows the potential impact to a 2,000-gallon residential user. So they're currently paying about $105 across all three services. With a 12% water rate increase, that would go up by about $10.50 across all three services. 15% increase, it goes up by about $13 across all three services. At the 4,000-gallon number, they're paying about $128 right now, so it goes up by about $13 for the 12% and about $16 for the 15%. So again, we are trying to limit the impact, particularly to our low volume and residential water users. But the reality is we're in pretty, the situation has gotten very real in terms of water and sewer and the demands on the system.
Sir, 1 second. Let's let the council discuss first. And then I'll have you, if you don't mind, I'll have you step up to the mic and speak up there. Council, does anyone have any questions for Megan regarding the water presentation? Okay. Sir, if you don't mind, we'll open up the public hearing. Anyone in the audience that would like to address the agenda item number 8, please state your name, sir.
George Peralta, 305 Corsicana Street.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hear all these problems. I see it. I'm a financial guy. It seems to me years of neglect of whoever runs the city, not fixing our infrastructure is where we are. I understand the pipes. I understand the whole deal. I got that. I look at that and I think, I'm paying $400 a month for water in the summer. I unfortunately try to keep my foundation good, and then I like to have a yard that's not dead. So this year I'm looking at just letting it die. I'm not going to sacrifice my my soaking system around the foundation of my garage and my house. So it's just frustrating. It's years of neglect. Whoever didn't handle this for the last 20 years, they just passed the buck. And so you're saying, you know, $10, $20. I'm not worried about that. I'm 77. I still work. And I got cancer, okay? That's why I'm wearing this stupid thing. But I don't see that increase. I see $200 increase a month. That's frustrating. So that's, you know, kind of where I'm coming from. It's just, and can't go back and change what wasn't done. I'd like to know who ran this place for 20 years, you know? But just passing the buck and saying, we'll take care of that next year. It's not the way you take care of business. So I understand your predicament. I got a predicament too. So what can I do? Thank you.
Thank you, George. Anyone else in the audience that would like to address this specific agenda item? Hazel, please.
Okay, you want me to use the podium?
Yes. We have this new system, and we'd like to make sure that we get all, everybody that speaks.
No problem, you're running the show. Okay, I've got a pretty good solution to this. I've been talking to Councilmember Hernandez. I've tried to talk with Megan on this. With talking with him, he said that there is a 57% leak rate with the water coming in to the city. So it's obviously bigger leaks than we anticipated. You guys are trying to propose $1.2 million increase in revenue with the rates going up. I don't disagree that the rates should go up every year, but they shouldn't be 15%. Maybe 5% increments. She just said that they don't foresee any more increases for a while. Raise it 5% over the next 5 years to get to whatever number you really want to get to. That way, nobody really sees a big change like this gentleman that was just speaking. You don't see a $200, you may see a $30, $40 increase. The general fund budget, which you can pay for water out of, the police budget is taking up 37% of that. That money, if you cut his budget 25%, which would take him down to $3.8 million, and a department this size typically at max runs about $3.4 million. So it'd even give him a little extra to spare if he needs it. That would cover your $1.2 million, increase your rate by 5% a year for the next few years, and kind of get this infrastructure. The only problem that you're having is the last time we did this last year, she installed 2 new pipes at 2 new locations, not to the old system. We didn't fix anything down here at the old system. We're waiting on TxDOT. We're waiting on TxDOT to do that, and unfortunately, we don't know when TxDOT's going to do it because of things that have to be logistically moved. So I'm proposing that if we are going to do an increase, it's less than 10%. It's not 15, it's not 20. I mean, I would say 5. Cut the budget 25%, redo the math, recalculate it, take that $1.2 million fairly quick, because she says she needs $700,000, $800,000 over the summer, get it handled, and you still have a police force. The problem that I'm seeing with the police department is they're running 12-hour shifts. So you're getting overtime. Why not run them 10-hour shifts? Cut a little overtime down. You can knock the budget down without actually having to increase these water rates as high as they are. So, I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at. I just hope you guys take that serious. Look at the budget. Look where you can trim the fat. I know the rates have to go up a little bit. They don't have to go up drastically, and we don't see any more rates for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Let them kind of level themselves out, but do it gradually, not just rip off the Band-Aid and now we're hurting bad. So, I mean, that's pretty much what I got to say about that, though.
Anyone else in the audience that would like to address the water rate agenda item? I should have asked. Are we stuck with Aquila? Are there any other alternatives? We're in a contract with Aquila, yes, sir.
Mayor, if I could respond.
Sure.
Just to provide a little clarification, we probably will need to do a 3%, 5% increase on an annual basis to keep up with regular cost increases from Aquila and inflation and, you know, just the increased costs of running the system. And so the idea of doing the bare minimum necessary right now is sort of what is exactly what's baked into this recommendation. The other clarification, the lines that have been replaced were replacements of existing lines in the system. The line from the College Tower to the outlet mall was an existing line in the system that was leaking water, and we replaced it and resulted in all of that decrease. There was a line in Hummingbird, there's a line coming from the industrial park through to the country club. Those are big lines that were chosen, as I said, because they run through fields. They're big in diameter, they have a lot of pressure, and so they have the potential to lose a lot of water because of the size and velocity of the pipes. And because they're running through undeveloped areas, they're relatively inexpensive to fix, and you don't need all the engineering. So that's why they were selected, but they're replacements, not new lines run.
Anyone else in the audience that would like to address agenda item number 8? Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing, and I'm assuming at this point, council will need to decide on a percent increase.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Council, does anyone want to discuss a percent increase amount? Make a motion.
Water has to pay for water. I think water has to pay for water. It can't pay for it out of the general fund, I tell you everything. It's not fun, I don't like it, but water's gotta pay for water.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the 15%, will that cover what we need to do the downtown project?
No, but no, but it gets us closer.
Well, I mean, there's no reason to keep it, if we need 20 to do it, I suppose we do 20 right now.
Anyone else want to say any words? Okay.
I mean, I think with the current condition, if we don't act now, then we're looking at, I mean, maybe it's inflammatory words, but catastrophic failures of the system if these things don't get resolved. I mean, it's something
like every old city has problems. Looking at our problems with long-term eyes is easier than today's eyes, right? So the very thing that made Hillsborough great 150 years ago is our blackland soil. 150 years ago, Hill County was the #1 producer of cotton in Texas, and maybe the United States, I don't know. Maybe there was somewhere in the South that was a larger producer. But that same thing that made us great back then is working against us now because gumbo clay comes with blackland soil. And so it affects our foundations of our houses that are continuing to crumble. It affects our streets. It affects our pipes. So this is something I believe that generations ago should have been addressed by city leadership and wasn't. Can was kicked down the road. And now we're at a point where the road has gotten so short we're up against a brick wall, and if we kick any more, the can just falls at our feet. And so I'm a citizen just like everyone else is here, and I don't want to see anything go up. I think 20% would be a little harsh. I'd like to support a 15% increase.
I do agree with Larry. The 80s was the streets. They opted not to do any repairs to the water lines because streets were important. They came in and did all the streets. The water lines were neglected during the 80s and the 90s, and here we are now dealing with the problem 30, 40 years down the road. The problem is not going to get any better. And we're all still going to be living here, and we'll all be having this conversation again next year when we need more money. It's not my job to pick a percent that we go up, but there will need to be some sort of rate increase. Council, does anyone else want to discuss? Okay, with none, then I'll need to entertain a motion, and it will need to include a percent rate increase. I do hear 215 and 120. I do hear want to go back to the table and maybe come up with some more reasonable numbers. So, council, does anyone want to make a recommendation or make a motion with a percent increase?
I move we approve a 15%.
We got Councilmember Richmond with a motion for a 15% increase. Do I have a second?
Second.
We got a motion and a second. City Secretary.
Councilmember Clayton.
Aye.
Councilmember Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
No.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Richmond. Aye. Councilmember Vargas.
No.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. Hold a public hearing, second reading, and deliberate and act on an ordinance to increase wastewater service rates.
Mayor and council, the wastewater rates are pretty low. The original thought was if we would stop robbing from wastewater in order to pay for water, then we could just leave the wastewater rates the way that they were. As we saw, that didn't quite work out. But in the meantime, because people have started to use less water, that means they're using less wastewater. So instead of wastewater rates remaining flat, the rates have remained flat, but the revenues have fallen significantly. So unfortunately, we need to cover the cost of providing that service as well. This proposal restructures the sewer rates to make them match the water rates, where there's a minimum bill and then usage starts at 0. So this decreases the minimum bill from what it currently is, and then changes the per 1,000 gallons rate from $2.69 to $3 for residential and $3.50 for commercial. So in terms of absolute numbers, this is a pretty small increase because the dollars we're talking about, we're just talking about cents on each bill. So currently, yes, so what we would be looking at is, let me go back. So currently, the minimum bill is $17.33, which includes 2,000 gallons. The minimum bill would be $13, but you'd pay $3 for each of those first 2,000 gallons, which currently comes with the minimum. So $13, $17, $25, $35, $65, and then it would be $3 per 1,000 gallons for residents and $3.50 per 1,000 gallons for non-residents. That is the recommendation. And then we saw this at the 15% water rate increase. This would be a total of about a $13 increase for a 2,000 gallon user and about a $16.50 increase for a 4,000 gallon user.
So this is just a straight pass-through, right?
Pardon?
Pretty much just a straight pass-through for waste.
Yes, basically, yes.
Council, any questions for Ms. Henderson regarding the wastewater sewer rates? Sorry, the wastewater service rates. Okay, this does require a public hearing. We'll open the second reading up to anyone in the audience that would like to address agenda item number 9 regarding the wastewater service rates.
Okay, I'm gonna make this one real quick. Obviously, we've already made up our minds that we're gonna vote to increase every single thing up here. The only concern I have is the 2 people that are moving out of town are voting on it. So it doesn't really affect them like they just stated. They say they're citizens here. He's selling his house, I don't know, she says she lives here, but bottom line is this, it doesn't affect these 2. So of course, everything here is gonna get passed. The only 2 people that are actually doing the honest thing and trying to gouge the citizens because of poor management are these 2. So I commend them. I know you don't have a vote unless it's a tiebreaker, Mayor, so I'm not gonna blame you for this. But shame on the rest of you. Shame on the rest of you. This is bad management. You guys have had 5 years to address this and gradually do this. And now you're gonna slam everybody at once on the same day for 3 different agendas to raise this 15 to 20% because she thinks this is their personal piggy bank. So just think about that. 2 of you aren't gonna live here anytime soon. You guys are leaving. The rest of you gotta stay here and live with these people. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, anyone else in the audience that would like to address this specific agenda item? Okay, hearing none. Are you gonna make one more comment?
Pardon?
You're making another comment? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll entertain a motion.
Move we approve.
Got a motion? Need a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second?
Councilmember Cody? Councilmember Lloyd?
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Richmond? Aye. Councilmember Carter?
Okay. Agenda item number 10, hold a public hearing, second reading, and deliberate and act on an ordinance to increase trash service rates.
Mayor and council, this rate increase has essentially been approved in terms of the city's cost from Frontier. Our contract with Frontier allows them to increase our rates by 5% overall. The increase that was approved by council a couple of meetings ago was less than a 5% across the board increase. It was a 5% increase for residences and a 10% increase for some commercial businesses, while the larger manifested commercial businesses that had separately negotiated fairly high rates already, they're held harmless in this increase. So the city is already paying these higher rates. We're already receiving those increases on our bill. So this would just essentially pass on that increase to the customers so that we don't lose money.
Council, any questions to Ms. Henderson regarding the trash service rates?
Megan, when we switched from Republic to Frontier last year, it was a significant decrease in our rates, and we passed that on to the citizens, right?
Yes, sir.
Also an increase in services because we got actually brush pickup.
Yes, sir.
To that. With the proposed increase, do we know how that compares to what we were doing with Republic at the?
With residential service, it is still lower. With commercial service, it's a little bit closer, but still lower than the rates before the switch.
Council, any more questions for Ms. Henderson?
The increases is only consistent with the CPI that referred to the contract? Is it only going up with the CPI was, I guess, the terms of the contract being that it can raise up to the CPI?
Yes, sir. The CPI are 5%, whichever is high, or whichever is lower. So the CPI was higher than 5%, so the 5% is the cap. And if you apply the 5% across all customers, the proposed rate increase is less than that amount that's limited by the contract.
Council, any other questions? Okay, this does require a public hearing, so we'll open it up to anyone in the audience that would like to address trash service rates. Again, anyone? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we.
Got a motion? Got a motion and a second?
Councilmember Simmons? Councilmember Lloyd?
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson?
No.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Richmond? Aye. Councilmember Garner? Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda here, deliberate on city manager report.
Mayor and council, I'd like to start with a report on open records that was was listed on the agenda for last time, but we kind of had a full evening, and so I'm just going to hit some highlights. And this is just a kind of a snapshot view, but I'd had a couple of questions from council members and thought it'd be appropriate to share this information. So just in the last 30 days, we've had 62 open records requests. Our top 2 requesters comprise 28 of those 62 requests, or 45% of the total number of requests. Across all requesters, the average request contains about 5 points or facets. So it'll be like, let me see, this, and this, relating to that, and that. And requires the work of 2 people. That's kind of on average. We have 1 requester from whom the average request contains approximately 18 points or facets and requires the work of 5 people. So this means that 5 people have to first estimate, they have to look at these 18 points and try to figure out how much time it's going to take to do that. And I would just ask anybody here to think about if somebody knocked on your door and said, I need you to be able to deliver to me every document in your house that contains the word electricity, how long would you estimate it would take you to go through all of your belongings and be sure that you were 100% not missing anything? That's what, on average, 5 people have to do every time we get this across 18 different points. This also means that the city secretary has to coordinate among all of these people, and then we've got to, gather everything, and there's legal timelines, there's inquiries in terms of what's legal that has to be done, timelines, you've got to deal with the payment and all those things. So it's our privilege to do this work. I want to be clear, it's our privilege to do this work. I just think it's important that it's understood that there's a lot to it. It's not as easy as it may appear to come up with an estimate and then provide the information. The other part is that only the cost for the work actually collecting the requested documents can be recovered. So the coordination, the trying to figure it out what it means, the getting all the 5 people together and asking them for their estimates and all this other stuff, that's all just paid by the taxpayer, not by the requester. And then finally, the city recovers roughly 30% of the cost of the eligible time. So of the things that are paid by the requester, we're only allowed to collect because the state puts a limit in terms of the hourly rate. So what we are allowed to collect is about 30% of the cost of the eligible time and none of the cost of the other time. So While it is, again, an important part of what we do, it is a privilege to provide information to people who need it. It is a privilege to make public what the city is doing with people's taxpayer dollars. We signed up for this. We care about it. It's important to us. But let it be understood that it is a significant amount of time and that a high dollar estimate may reflect a high dollar amount of work, 70% of which is being paid for out of the city's budget and taxpayers and water rates and all of those things. Now, onto the regular city manager's report, where we're doing second council meeting of the month. We're doing goals 5 through 8 out of our strategic plan. So, we had an employee convocation yesterday, and I got to talk to our employees about our strategic plan, and it sort of reminded me of a little bit more of the language than we usually get into, and so just for everybody's enjoyment, here's a little bit of the extra language around each of these goals. So the goal, Build Better Infrastructure, says we're going to formally assess the condition of our street, water, and sewer infrastructure, and we're going to implement projects and processes that, if sustained over time, will bring and keep those systems in predominantly good condition. And it's worded like that because it was understood at the time of the plan that things were bad, things were not in good condition, and that we were not going to be able to get them in good condition in a period of 5 years. Rather, this is going to be a decades situation. We need to find the projects and processes that, we need to find those things now, and then we need to be prepared to implement them steadily and reliably over time in order to bring the systems into predominantly good condition. So looking at and we added drainage, so the goal is to assess the condition, and we've done that with streets and water. We've done the first phase with sewer. With drainage, we have an assessment planned, and that assessment is going to be paid for. $300,000 drainage study is going to be paid for by the Texas Water Development Board. Moving into the projects and processes that, if sustained over time, will bring the system into good condition. We've completed the street and infrastructure project. We're going to talk about the TxDOT courthouse project. The engineering is underway for that. And then on water, we have line replacements, phase 1. Engineering is underway for that project because we're applying for $7 million this summer from Texas Water Development Board. If we're successful, that is the kind of project that could juice our line replacement work and help us get faster to the place where we're reducing that water loss and reducing our cost. So everybody pray. In drainage, the projects associated with improving drainage will be recommended at the end of that assessment process. Now, talking about processes that, if we continue them, will help us. In streets, we're looking at in-house replacement of streets. We have purchased the equipment for that. We have posted a position. We're hoping to begin that process over the summer, and we want to be clear, this is a new thing for us. We're not going to be great at it in the beginning. This is one of those we're going to have to get good at it and sustain it over time, but we're confident that this is the way to do it. We're going to probably be bad at it for the first little while because we're bad at stuff when we're new. Give us some grace and we'll get better. Underwater, our process is constant contract replacement. So we talked about that. That's the thing that we started implementing. We changed what we were doing. It started to make a difference. That is underway. In sewer, we have a process that will be beginning in budget 2027 to coat the interior of existing manholes that will reduce infiltration and inflow. And then obviously drainage, we don't know yet. Quickly looking at the Courthouse Square project, we've talked about this. We've got to replace the lines underneath the fresh concrete that's going in. We had our last conference call with TxDOT on this project last Friday. They did confirm that reimbursement can be made at intervals throughout the project. We will not have to wait to be reimbursed at the end. So that is a big relief in terms of cash flow. Constant replacement of water lines. Previously completed, we've done 2% of the needed linear feet. We currently have about 600,000 planned, including some funding that was allocated to this from the EDC for eligible lines that touch the industrial park. That gives us about 6% of the total needed linear feet. That we think is going to result, because these are disproportionately leaky, disproportionately large, bigger pipes. We think conservatively that's going to net us maybe a 9% reduction in water loss, which is more than 10% of the amount of water that we purchased from Aquila last year. So, you know, the equivalent of maybe $500,000 worth of cost to our customers. So yeah, on one side, 6%, that's not a lot. But on the other side, if we can knock down costs, if we can keep doing this over time, it's not insignificant. All right, goal number 5, I'm sorry, that was goal number 5. Goal number 6 is to deliver essential services. Deliver streets, water, wastewater, parks, public safety, and other essential services and systems that are dependable, in good repair, and of acceptable and or improving quality. Again, we're not all great, but we're trying to get better. In terms of water and wastewater, the major things we're doing are trying to work towards utility fiscal health, as we've already discussed. Street maintenance, we did purchase this year a crack sealer. We had one, it had broken irreparably. By crack sealing the streets that we have that are okay, we will extend their life. That has been a big thing that the city has not done historically. We don't have very many great streets, but we can keep them in better condition by doing preventive maintenance. So that is happening, and we also have utility cut repairs underway. In parks, we have a lot going on in the parks over the summer, so we're just trying to keep the facilities maintained. We did have a problem with the splash pad, but it has been repaired. And then continuing operations in public safety. We've had a lot of shenanigans lately and really appreciate our first responders. Goal 7 is to boost economic development. Meaning we're going to implement business retention and attraction programs so that a variety of small and large businesses meet our residents' employment, entertainment, and commercial needs, and establish Hillsborough as a vital part of Central Texas's economic landscape. So goal 7.1 was business attraction, continuing our due diligence with Project Dispatch, Project Freeze Pop. Their closing date on that property has been extended, but we are expecting that property sale to close soon. Project Treasure Hunt is reviewing possible partnership options. We've had no recent movement on Project Pit Stop, and then Retail Coach continues to do what they do for the city. Goal 7.3, entrepreneurship and small businesses. We do have some new businesses coming into downtown, including a restaurant and retail experience. Deeper dive today on the outlet mall. So just kind of looking at numbers, and I want to stress that these are estimates. These are projections based on what we know. They are educated guesses, but they're not crystal ball forecasts, right? This is just kind of best available information. So the first 2 years of the TIRZ, the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone, created around the outlet mall to help us do that project. First 2 years are complete. The developer has to meet the development requirement. That was sort of, the city says, you know, in order for us to consider you successful, you have to do, and it was 3 pad sites if Chick-fil-A was one, and 4 pad sites if Chick-fil-A was not one. Chick-fil-A was a big community priority. So if he completed the development requirement, there would be a reduction in his demolition cost. The city would pay 30%. If he did an additional pad site beyond that, it would be an additional 30%. An additional pad site beyond that would complete his demolition cost. So the city has paid for the demolition cost, but if these 3 things are not all met, if he doesn't do the initial development requirement plus 2 additional pad sites, then we get reimbursed those portions of the demolition cost. We anticipate that that's going to happen because we have you know, Chick-fil-A, Chili's, Panda, Waffle House, Boot Barn, all coming, and expected to open this year, except for Boot Barn, which should be first quarter of 2027. So, I mean, yes. So we anticipate that that development requirement will be met, plus the additional incentives earned, but the developer has a letter of credit on file that we can draw on if he fails to perform. The TIRZ revenues are expected to pay for the full demolition costs, so reimbursing the city for all of that cost by 2032. And then the TIRZ and additional property tax revenues are expected to pay for all of the city's costs regarding the mall up until this point by 2033. Now, that doesn't include the land purchase. So the land purchase, we bought the land for $3.55 a square foot. The agreement is the developer to purchase it back from us has to pay $425. So assuming we sell both tracts to the developer within the time frame, that would be up to $892,000 in additional money back to the city, over and above what we paid for it. That does not include, none of that includes the $1.4 million in sales tax that we expect to take in from 2026 through 2033. These projections do not include the lease revenue that we're currently getting, which is approximately $100,000 a year. And they do not include additional pad site development. And that's significant because Chili's has broken records. They've created company records in terms of their first week sales. They're going gangbusters, and so the developer is taking that information out to additional businesses and saying, hey, come to Hillsborough, you can make more money than maybe you thought based on the size of the community. And he says those conversations are going really well. So none of that is included. It could speed up our reimbursement timeline, but just trying to go with what we know. What we're talking about when we're talking about the outlet mall, phase 1 and 1A is everything with red letters. So that is the pad sites that are happening. And so when I say additional pad sites, you can see that there's room for 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 additional buildings in that section that belongs to the developer currently. We're also talking about new retail that is potentially locating in the affectionately known as the Mallmageddon building. We are getting that space ready and showing it to potential tenants. There are a couple that I think would be fantastic that the community would be really excited about. Obviously, we don't know, nothing's real until they come, but very, very hopeful. Bath & Body continues to operate where they are, and if we can make the numbers work, there's interest in putting a pocket park in the dirt area where that one building came down. That would include just some basically bare bones playground equipment, some swings, some benches, and a fenced-in area for a dog park. Our community doesn't have a dog park anywhere, so it would be a benefit to the community, but it would also be a benefit to people coming in, and that helps us because if we become known as the spot to stop on your way because you can get out and let the kids or the dogs run around, then our little money trap for the I-35 travelers is more successful for the city, and we make our investment back faster. So that's all phase 1 and phase 1A. Phase 2 is potentially warehousing distribution on the southern portion of the back. Not very exciting, but it pays the bills. And then phase 3 would be a big box, hopefully a grocery store with some initials in its name, that would be potentially interested in coming once we've grown a little bit. This would give us the site for that business to locate. And then nothing that's being planned for phases 1 and 1A would be a big deal to just relocate somewhere else when it's time to redevelop that site. So this, I like numbers and charts. This may be a little much, but so this has some alternatives in it. So if we hold on to the North Tract, we lose money based on compared to what we paid for it, right? Because we're not selling all of it that we bought. But if we sell both tracts, we make $892,000. The sales tax to the city is about $1.4 million. Sales tax to the EDC is about $500,000. Property tax low and property tax high depends on whether or not we start phase 2, construction of buildings, inside that 8-year window. I think we will. But if we don't, we want to be prepared, like what does that worst case scenario look like? So what you see, the best case scenario is everything happens within the 8 years. The city makes about $2.3 million over and above everything we've invested in the outlet mall. And again, that doesn't include the rent. It doesn't include additional pad sites. Then we get to some alternatives. Plan B, we still sell both of the tracts, but the distribution buildings don't get built within the 8 years. That's a lower amount of profit, but we're still in the red. Plan C, we hold on to the North Tract because we still want HEB to come, let's say. We still get our sales tax. We still, the distribution builds, we're still in the red, but not a lot. We're kind of breaking even. The worst-case scenario is that we decide we still want to hold on to that north tract, and the distribution doesn't build in the 8 years. If that's the case, we're still negative by about $700,000, and we've got some options. So in that case, we've decided to hold on to the north tract, which we don't have to do. So we've decided it's worth it for us to hold that north tract. It's worth millions of dollars at that point. So, you know, we've decided it's worth it to us. We can go to the EDC that has made $400,000 plus on this development and say, hey, EDC, can you ease our loss a little bit? It's eligible because that warehousing and distribution section is eligible for EDC investment. So they have the ability, if they choose, if we ask them to, you know, if we find ourselves in that position, that's an option. Either way, in the worst case scenario, if the EDC, or even without the EDC money, you go out 2 more years in the future and it breaks even. So 2035, less than 10 years from now, even under the worst case scenario, we expect the city to be fully whole. Now, no crystal ball, but this is exactly what the city had in mind, and it was numbers like these that the city council considered when the project was approved, back when it was approved, and it's a pleasure to be able to report that as of now, you know, things are still looking kind of the way we thought that they would look. Goal number 8 is to enhance quality of life, meaning we're going to maintain a system of clean, functional, and varied enrichment facilities and programs throughout the city, including best-in-class library and team sports. Over at library, we are reviewing the costs of the proposed expansion and possibly examining whether there's other directions that we can go based on the facilities study. Summer programming is in full swing. There are hundreds and hundreds of kids in the library. And talking about expansion, part of the reasoning behind that project that council considered several years ago is because we literally can't fit enough people in the library to support all of the things and all the kids that are using it. The regular programming continues, so we've got knitting, chess club, story hour. There's a Dungeons and Dragons club. There's a seed library. There's all kinds of things happening in the library. It's almost more of a community center than what you think about as a traditional library. And then in Parks and Rec, there's a tournament in Wallace Park all week and every weekend, kind of for the foreseeable future. I think we've got district there now. They were here all week last week and all week this week, and then more tournaments continuing for the duration. We had a staff convocation yesterday. That was amazing. It's always a privilege to be in the room with staff. And then we had a fantastic Bonds Alley weekend. Bonds Alley hosted by Hillsborough Arts League. And there were kind of add-on Firefly-related experiences. Those were, I think, well attended, well received. There are folks in the room, I think, who participated, not just in enjoying those activities, but in setting up for them and cleaning up and all of that. And we could not do these events without volunteers, so we're very, very grateful for all of those folks. I would take any questions about the staff report.
What order? Julie, get a statement of fact before you guys.
Hang on a second. Council, does anyone have any questions regarding any of that?
On the park, do we charge when they come and play? Do we charge for them? Do we charge for the beach when we come and play ball during the summertime? Would you charge?
Councilman, any further questions from Megan? Megan, can you go back to the open records request? So there's one thing at the bottom I didn't know.
Yeah, I had hoped to have kind of a total, at like $1 total.
That's what I was going to ask you. Down at the bottom, do you have an idea of what that's actually costing the taxpayer that we've had to spend maybe over, let's say, like the past year?
I really would hate to estimate. I really need to, I need to pull actual, or as close as I can get to actual numbers. I would hate to speculate. Jasmine may have a better idea.
I'd like to see some numbers for that. And I guess at some point in time, the question then becomes, at what point in time, what options does the city have at that point? If you continue to we're continuing to spend city resources nonstop on answering, because I'm assuming some of these requests are requests that come in, and you do all this work to find these requests, and then all of a sudden, yeah, I don't really want to pay that. We're still out the money to do all the research and find this information, correct?
In a lot of cases, if the cost estimate to fulfill the request is greater than $40, we put an estimate together, the requester is given the estimate, and then they say, proceed and do the work. We then proceed and do the work, and then they're supposed to pay the invoice before they receive the records.
But we're still having.
So they have to agree.
We still have to put the work forward for a majority of the requests, correct?
Yes, sir.
I would like to see some numbers on that. I mean, there's got to be an option there for municipalities where you're just stretching that resource too thin.
We will, staff will put some numbers together and we'll bring something to the next council meeting.
Council, any further questions? Okay,